And I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand.
They say it's never too late to chase a dream. But how late is too late when the world has already moved on? At 40 years old, Chuck Adams walked onto the America's Got Talent stage with a quiet resolve that betrayed the storms he had weathered. No flashy background, no sob story package, just a man with a guitar and a voice time almost forgot. What most viewers didn't know was that this wasn't his first shot. Far from it. Years ago, Chuck had tasted the edges of stardom. A record deal once promised to make him the next big thing, but in a cruel twist of fate, the music industry closed its doors just as he thought he'd arrived. For over a decade, Chuck drifted in the margins, unheard, unseen, but never fully giving up. His performance on AGT wasn't a breakout, it was a return, a defiant middle finger to the years he spent wondering if he'd missed his moment. When he strummed those first few chords of Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls, it wasn't just another audition. It was a man reclaiming his voice. The crowd didn't know his history, but they felt it. Every note carried the weight of chances lost and second winds found. He didn't need theatrics, he had authenticity. And that authenticity hit harder than any pyrotechnic stage show. But what most people didn't see in that moment was the story that brought him here. The years of silence, the mother who refused to let him quit, and the industry that had once promised him everything then left him with nothing. This wasn't just a performance, it was unfinished business, and Chuck Adams was finally ready to collect. But how did he even get here after all these years? Long before he ever stepped foot on a talent show stage, Chuck Adams was already being whispered about in underground music circles as the one to watch. Raised in a small Connecticut town, Chuck's childhood was filled with the sounds of classic rock records, late-night songwriting sessions, and the unwavering encouragement of his mother, Betty, who believed her son's voice could move the world. By his early 20s, he wasn't just another guy with a guitar. He was signed. A real record deal. The kind of moment most young musicians dream of while staring at the ceiling late at night. Labels called him raw, marketable, gifted. His sound blended modern grit with nostalgic soul. For a fleeting moment, it looked like everything was falling into place. He had producers, meetings, even a few industry showcases that turned heads. But the excitement didn't last. As quickly as the deal came, it began to unravel. Creative clashes, internal label shifts, and promises that dissolved into silence. No album, no single, just a void where momentum should have been. And just like that, Chuck faded into the shadows of an industry known for chewing up talent and forgetting names. But he never stopped writing, never stopped singing, even when no one was listening. In the world's eyes, he had disappeared. But in his own quiet universe, the dream still flickered, barely alive, but never extinguished. And it would take more than a failed record deal to keep Betty Adams from pushing her son back into the spotlight. Because while the world moved on, she never stopped believing he had something the industry missed the first time. And as the years passed, so did the weight of an unfulfilled promise. Until one day, that weight became fuel. So what exactly pushed Chuck to finally take that leap again? For most people, failure is a private affair. But for Chuck Adams, the collapse of his music dreams happened just close enough to success that it left scars deeper than most could see. After the record deal crumbled, there was no dramatic fallout, no viral moment of downfall, just a slow, suffocating silence. One by one, the calls stopped. The studio time dried up. Industry contacts ghosted him. He went from boardroom meetings with executives to playing forgotten open mics, where no one remembered his name. And worse than the professional rejection was the internal war. The quiet fear that maybe he wasn't good enough after all. For nearly 12 years, Chuck drifted. No manager, no team, just an aging dream and a day-to-day hustle. He worked odd jobs to survive, bartending, carpentry, even temp gigs, anything that gave him just enough breathing room to write a new song or pick up his guitar after a long shift. But each year that passed seemed to widen the gap between the artist he once was and the one he still hoped to become. The music industry, now obsessed with viral hits and TikTok moments, had no space for a nearly 40 unknown with a bruised past. And yet, through it all, Chuck kept writing. Not for fame anymore, but because it was the only thing that reminded him he was still alive. Those lost years weren't wasted. They were filled with lyrics scrawled in notebooks, raw voice notes never heard, and quiet nights spent clinging to the one thing that hadn't betrayed him: the music. But even so, the world doesn't reward patience. It rewards momentum, and Chuck had none until one voice, a familiar one, convinced him it wasn't too late. And that voice didn't come from inside, it came from home. So, who was the force behind Chuck's unexpected return? Behind every quiet comeback, there's often a louder believer. And for Chuck Adams, that unwavering force was his mother, Betty, a woman whose faith in her son's gift never wavered, even as the music industry slammed door after door in his face. While Chuck spent over a decade tucked behind the curtain, slowly burying his once burning dream, Betty kept fanning the embers. To her, Chuck wasn't some washed-up could-have-been. He was still that wide-eyed boy with a second-hand guitar and a voice that made strangers cry. Every time he'd walk away from music, she'd nudge him back. Every time he'd say, "Maybe I'm too old," she'd reply, "Maybe you're just in time." It wasn't blind optimism. It was belief rooted in years of watching him pour his soul into songs that no one else heard. And it was Betty who first brought up AGT, not as a last shot, but as a fresh one. A platform where authenticity, not clout, mattered. Chuck resisted. The idea of stepping in front of cameras, at his age, felt more humiliating than hopeful. But Betty didn't push, she persisted. Quietly, consistently, until the day Chuck said, "What if?" That "what if" led to an audition form. That form led to a callback. And suddenly, the man who once walked away from a broken industry found himself standing in front of a national audience with nothing but a guitar and years of unspoken hurt. He didn't walk onto the AGT stage to win. He walked on to honor the one person who never stopped clapping, even when the music stopped. And when that first spotlight hit him, it wasn't fear in his eyes. It was gratitude. Gratitude for a mother who refused to let him fade. But what happened once he opened his mouth? And why did one simple song nearly bring the house down? When Chuck Adams walked onto the America's Got Talent stage that night, there was no glitter, no gimmick, and no grand backstory reel to prepare viewers for what was about to happen. Just a man, a guitar, and a song that millions had heard before, yet somehow, under his voice, it felt brand new. Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls is not a particularly risky song. It's familiar, safe even. But in Chuck's hands, it became something else entirely. An emotional excavation of every lost year, every closed door, every sleepless night wondering if he still mattered. From the first line, the room fell into a hush. No backing track, no vocal acrobatics, just raw, broken clarity. His voice cracked in places, but not from weakness, from truth. By the first chorus, the audience was leaning forward. By the second, they were erupting in cheers. Sofia Vergara looked stunned. Howie Mandel mouthed, "Wow," before the first verse had even ended. Simon Cowell, ever the skeptic, leaned in, really leaned in. And when the final note rang out, there was a moment of stillness before the eruption. A full standing ovation. Judges, crew, audience, everyone. And yet, no golden buzzer, no confetti, no easy reward. But Chuck didn't look disappointed. He looked like a man who had finally been heard. For the first time in years, the music didn't echo into silence. It echoed into thunder. And perhaps that's what made it even more powerful. Because what Chuck gave wasn't a performance, it was proof. Proof that quiet persistence can outlast failure. Proof that when you sing from the deepest part of yourself, people listen. Still, as the cameras faded and the applause died down, a new question began to circulate. Had America just rediscovered a star it forgot too soon? Or was this just the beginning of something far bigger? The judges on America's Got Talent have seen it all: flashy stunts, sob stories, viral hopefuls. But there was something different in the way they responded to Chuck Adams. It wasn't just applause, it was respect. Simon Cowell, known for his brutal honesty, didn't critique Chuck's song choice or delivery. Instead, he acknowledged something intangible: presence. Not stage presence in the showbiz sense, but a quiet, unshakable confidence earned the hard way. Sofia Vergara told Chuck he could go very far, and it wasn't flattery. It was a recognition of authenticity. Mel B, who once toured the world with the Spice Girls, admitted his nerves showed in moments, but added that the emotion cut through louder than any flaw. Even Howie, often drawn to comedy and spectacle, said Chuck had that it factor you don't teach. But beyond the praise, there was a subtle shift happening. Viewers online weren't just commenting on the performance, they were dissecting the man behind it. Why hadn't we heard of him sooner? How did he stay so grounded? What made him different from the other guitar guys who come and go each season? The answer may lie in Chuck's approach. He's not chasing trends, viral dances, or judges' favor. He's simply telling the truth through music. And in an industry drowning in overproduction and auto-tune, that simplicity has become a rarity. Chuck isn't trying to be famous. He's trying to be felt. And maybe that's why his story is sticking. Because when a man loses everything and still chooses to sing, you listen differently. But the real test was still ahead. What would happen next? Now that the world was paying attention, the moment Chuck Adams stepped off that stage, the ripple effect began. Twitter lit up with hashtags like #ChuckAdamsAJT and Iris Guy, as stunned viewers flooded social media with clips, reactions, and emotional breakdowns of his performance. YouTube comments turned into therapy sessions. People opening up about their own delayed dreams, heartbreaks, and the way Chuck's voice made them feel seen in ways they hadn't expected from a reality show audition. One post that went viral simply read, "He didn't just sing Iris, he lived it." And that sentiment echoed across fan pages, reaction videos, and even music forums, where industry veterans started asking the same question. Who is Chuck Adams, and why wasn't he famous already? Spotify streams of Iris jumped. Fan-made covers of his version appeared within 48 hours. Even TikTok, typically a space for fast trends and filters, began to fill with emotional edits of his AGT moment. Yet despite the overnight buzz, Chuck remained quiet. No interviews, no victory lap, just a subtle Instagram post, no caption, just a photo of his guitar resting by a window. Fans interpreted it as humble, mysterious, classic Chuck. But while the man himself stayed low-key, the speculation didn't. Some fans began wondering if he'd already been approached by labels. Others claimed to spot him meeting with producers in LA. One Reddit thread even suggested he'd been offered a feature on a major artist's next track. True or not, the buzz is undeniable, and AGT producers know it. Chuck's name is now a wild card in the competition. Not flashy, not viral for the wrong reasons, but resonant. And in a season full of gimmicks, he might just be the slow burn that surprises everyone in the final act. Still, with so much momentum and a second chance in his grasp, one question remains. Can Chuck hold on to the spotlight? Or will the industry repeat its mistakes again? Chuck Adams didn't walk into America's Got Talent looking for fame. He walked in carrying unfinished business. A voice once shelved by the industry, a dream buried under a decade of silence, and a fire kept alive by the quiet faith of a mother who never stopped believing. His story isn't one of overnight success. It's a collision between timing, talent, and the kind of pain that turns into art. And maybe that's why it resonates so deeply. Because Chuck doesn't represent the polished machine of showbiz. He represents the millions of artists who almost made it, who walked away, and who never stopped wondering what if. In an age where spectacle often outweighs soul, Chuck Adams stood still and let the music do the talking. And for once, the world listened. But now, with a national spotlight and a swelling fan base, he faces the very industry that once left him behind. Will it embrace him this time, or try to mold him into something he's not? The coming weeks will tell. For now, Chuck remains a symbol of quiet resilience, of raw truth wrapped in melody. His journey proves that the clock doesn't decide your worth, your voice does. And in a show filled with noise, Chuck Adams may just be the calm that cuts through it all. Because sometimes, the stories we forget become the ones we remember most. And if this is just the beginning for Chuck, the real song hasn't even started yet.